Hi guys, it's Leslie and welcome back to my channel. Today we're just going to go over what I read in February. February started out a little rough. I think after reading so much in January that I just sort of got in a slump. I didn't read anything in January that was like major love as far as how I felt about the book. So I think going into February I was a little down about it and it didn't really get that great until the very end of the month. So let's just go over what I read. You can judge for yourself if you'll like these books or not. The first book I finished was The Perfect Nanny by Leila Slimani, and this is translated by Sam Taylor, I believe. This is a story about a nanny who basically murders two of her children that she's watching. And the story is fine, but it's not great. Like, the story itself is not great. I didn't care. I loved the writing. I feel like I will certainly read more of Slimani's work in the future. I just didn't care that much about any of the characters. And you know at the very beginning what happened, so that's no spoiler. It's just sort of this, you see the buildup of how things happen. And I don't know, I just didn't really connect with any characters to care about it, especially knowing that two children die. I feel like maybe I should have been more connected, and I just really wasn't. My other sort of big negative about the book is that it kind of felt like the mother was to blame, quote unquote, about things. I feel like it was just the way that the mother character was written, and then based on her decisions, those were all sort of in this negative light. Now maybe that was the point, like to say that that's how society looks at working women or something like that, but I don't know, it just made me a little like, I just didn't love that. Other than that, it does have short chapters, which is always nice when you just, can get to the next few pages, or you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to keep reading, but you're like, oh, I can get to the next chapter because it's only 3 pages. I like that, and that was great for me kind of feeling slumpy at the beginning of the month. So I don't think it's bad, and I don't think people shouldn't read it. I just didn't love it. So it was about 3 stars for me. The next book I finished was The Japanese Lover by Isabel Allende. This is a story about a woman who is in like a retirement type of home, and she's sort of telling her story to one of the, I would say like a workers, like another assistant, and it's kind of about their parallel lives. I'm not explaining this very well, but for the most part it is about this older woman kind of talking about her life as she is in this home. And I really liked this. This is my first Allende book, and I'd always been a little nervous to read her because I was told she wrote pretty much magical realism, which is just not something I love. For some reason, at least the one book that I've read that's very magical realistic, I guess, is that how you say it? I didn't like it, and that's the Ava Lavender book by Leslie Walton. Just didn't love it. I don't know. I'm kind of in the minority for that one. But anyway, this book is really good. I don't know how to explain it as far as like the writing and all of that, but obviously it draws you in. It's a really good story about someone's life, and it's a lot about race and discrimination, because parts of it, the flashbacky parts, are World War II era with like Japanese internment camps, hence the title of Japanese Lover. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I thought it's really good. I think I did give it 4 stars because some of the World War II parts of it are very like info dumpy. They don't feel like they really go into the narrative all that well. It just feels like here's a lot of information to catch you up as to why this part of the story should be important. And maybe it's just because I read a ton of World War II books and interested in a lot of the history of World War II that I felt like I just didn't need it. But maybe for just a person who doesn't know much about it, it is helpful. But I really like this. And in my opinion, and I don't think this is really any kind of spoiler, but maybe it is, So I guess if you're really adverse to that, skip ahead a few seconds. But to me, it feels like the much better story of Evelyn Hugo. That's a huge book. People love it. It's all over, BookTube. And I didn't love it all that much, but I thought this has a lot of similarities in the plot or the story that are like that book, but I feel like are much better done, in my opinion. I believe I gave it 4 stars. I think I did. The next book I finished was The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is a story of a family who moved to Alaska, and the dad had just gotten back, been released from a POW camp in Vietnam, and he's trying to, get back to regular society. And he most likely has PTSD and other undiagnosed types of mental issues from his time at war. And then he moves to Alaska with his family, and it's a very isolating, cold environment, very unforgiving type of environment, and how their life goes with homesteading and all of that. I really, really liked this. My biggest con for the story is that it's too long. I think there's a couple scenes towards the end that are just unnecessary, and I feel like it's sort of drawn out when I didn't really need it, because there was a lot of emotional attachment you had to multiple characters. And for me, I just got a little bit bored towards the kind of the end. And I think it could have been about 50, 75, maybe even 100 pages shorter. Maybe not, but I think there could have been a few scenes definitely deleted. I think the story itself is fantastic. I love Kristen Hanna's writing. The atmosphere of Alaska is definitely, you can feel it. You can feel just this dread and this overwhelming sense of like, we need to be prepared because the winter is coming kind of thing. And I loved that. I also really, really enjoyed the fact that this was set in the 70s, and not just because that's like kind of a tumultuous time in American history, but also just because it is a time of pre-technology for the most part. I mean, they have phones, but you'd have to have like landlines, or, and in the story, they don't even really have electricity. I mean, the places that they live most have outhouses because it's so primitive. And I really liked that, because it takes away from all of these like crutches that we have in society now and makes communities come together. It really forces relationships, good or bad. And I loved that. I thought that was the strongest part of the book. I really think that this book is probably going to appeal to anybody. I don't know if I will say there's trigger warnings for major abuse, and that could, obviously take away from it if that's something you don't want to read about. So I will let you know that. But this really is an awesome, awesome book. I really did like it. Because I just got a little bored in places, I couldn't give it the full 5 stars, but definitely one of the better fiction stories I have read this year. After that, I read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I read this as a buddy read with Summer, and sorry, Summer, I kind of suck at reading Jane Austen, but I really liked this. It was really a fun book to buddy read, just because it's a book that the language can be a little, like, it can trip you up a little bit, especially if you're like me and haven't been in college or school for a really long time. And, I'm also kind of a dummy, so reading some of it, I'm just like, what happened? Who are they talking about? And Summer's like, no, not that person, this person. So she had to, keep me on track. And I did read it, listen to some of it on audiobook, read some of it in the physical book. And I just thought it was fun. The story is a little like, meh, like middle of the road for me, but I did like the writing a lot more than I thought I would as far as a Jane Austen story goes. I read Pride and Prejudice in maybe high school or college, and I didn't love it. I was not a fan. So this has kind of turned me back onto Jane Austen, and I'm excited to read more of her work in the future. And yeah, the buddy read was fun, and it was my first like actual completed buddy read, so I'm proud of myself for that in the month of February. Next book I finished was Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. This is a book I made a whole like review of it, which is the story of the Theranos Company and Elizabeth Holmes, a startup from like Silicon Valley who basically rose to superstardom, and it turned out to all be a giant lie. So that all came crashing down, and it's still sort of like an ongoing thing because there is like criminal investigations going on. And I absolutely love this. My first like absolute 5-star book of the year. This was awesome. It's nonfiction, so I mean some people are turned off just because it's nonfiction, but this felt like, I don't know, like reading a high-speed chase or something. Like you knew something, like there was a lot of momentum, and you know sort of from the beginning that things don't go well. So, and if you've, you know, heard anything on the news or Google any of it, you will know. But I just thought this entire story was completely fascinating. Highly, highly recommend. Even if you're not super into nonfiction, you may like this story. I also read An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. This is like a historical romance book, and it takes place in the Civil War, and the main girl is sort of like a spy. So she is an African-American girl who ends up being a spy in a southern home. Like she's planted there as a slave, even though she's a free black woman. And the story was like fine. It was cute. I'm not super into like straight romance stories. I'll read them here and there, but I actually ended up liking this more than I thought I would. It took me a long while to get into it, and it's not overly smutty, so if you're not into that, it's like easy to like skip if you wanted. And I don't know, I thought it was pretty cute. I think I would probably read more Alyssa Cole in the future if I just felt really in the mood for a romance book, but it was fine. Nothing great, not bad. And the last book I read was a comic. It's the DC Comics Bombshells by Marguerite Bennett. And this I pretty much just picked up for a Read Harder challenge. It's a comic written by a LGBTQ plus author. She writes and does the illustrations for these comics. And again, it was fine. There's nothing super great about it. It's sort of an alternate World War II history, so I liked the artwork because the superheroes, like Wonder Woman is sort of the main superhero you're following, and she's like very pin-up-y looking, which is fun. I thought that was cute. So the artwork is awesome. The story is just like okay. To me it was like sort of hard to follow, but I kind of suck at reading comics, so it's probably more me than the actual comic. If you're super into comics, maybe you'll like it, but I don't know. Overall, I thought it was just pretty to look at. That's probably not the best compliment, but that's okay. So this month was fine. I feel like it was I read quite a bit for feeling pretty slumpy, so I'm not displeased with that at all. I just wish I had read more that I really like loved. I'm really hoping March is better because of Middle Grade March, which I have a TBR coming very shortly. And yeah, I hope you had a good February, and I guess I'll talk to you next time. Bye.